Good evening, everybody. It's Nate G with Dr. Doug Lyle, who you just heard because I was having technical difficulties. How you doing, Dr. Lyle?
Good.
Still doing this out of my garage, but
yeah. There you go.
running into the 100th episode coming up next week, and we've gotten maybe 30% of the audio problems worked out. So slowly but surely, we're living in Mediocreville and getting closer to lousy.
Great.
All right. We got a lot of interesting questions today, so we'll just get right down to it. So I changed, for people who are subscribed to the Blog Talk Radio newsletter, I send out a reminder for the show, and once in a while I'll change the titles just as the questions come in. So today we are talking about socializing as an introvert, a concept called neoteny. I've never heard that word before, so I'll have to learn something too. Monotony? Neoteny.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
And why do women stay with unloving men? And then another question after that. So let's just get right down to it. You ready, Dr. Lyle?
All right.
Okay, dear Dr. Lyle, how much socializing does an introvert need? I've read that socializing is important to good health, but I feel like my friends enjoy being with me much more than I enjoy being with them. I'm 59, happily married to a fellow introvert, and it seems as we get older, our friends only have 3 topics of conversation: political rants, health complaints, and long rambling stories about people I don't know. I usually spend my time with others wishing they would just stop talking and trying to figure out a way to leave early.
This is just beautiful. This person is one of my clan. You don't need any socializing any more than you have a beautiful device buried inside your head to try to help you make ideal cost-benefit decisions, and that's what your emotions are. So it's called loneliness in this case. So if you're lonely, it motivates all human beings to go out there and connect with other people. So if you're one of these really needy extroverts, no, I'm just pulling people's chains. No, the truth. I'm
raising my hand high over here.
Yeah, I am. I'm very introverted by nature, and so I relate perfectly to this person's story. And the answer is that no, socializing is not good for your health. That's just utter BS. So that's typical things that they publish in Good Housekeeping magazine. That whatever quote science drove that is badly flawed. There isn't anything good at all about other people except that they could shoot you. Yeah, I mean, as far as your health, that's what effect they could have. Actually, interestingly enough, of course, we believe that there's quite a good chance that human beings' extrovertedness may be naturally tempered, and the reason why there are even people that are average or introverted is possibly because highly extroverted people probably had more sexual activity, and therefore they may have had essentially too many different partners to be ideal in evolution, and they got checked. In other words, that behavior that would seemingly be advantageous got checked by venereal disease, and so it looks like there is a sweet spot in the middle of the bell curve for right in the middle between introversion and extroversion, which idealizes your exposure and motivation to meet new people, and therefore idealizes your exposure to the sexual marketplace, but doesn't overexpose you nor underexpose you. Now, for myself, I'm terribly underexposed. And so such is life. But
so can you
the
clarify?
answer is, hold on, I want to continue. What we do in this life is you feel your way. You feel your way to the people and the circumstances that are you, that are a reflection of how to optimize your life experience. And so if you're getting signals that specifically in this case, these people and their topics are not a good cost-benefit analysis, then fade them down 30% and see if your life gets better. All right, what were you going to say?
Well, I was curious if you could clarify when you said that people don't actually get health benefits from being with each other. So, I don't consider myself an expert on this, but I very broadly have read a little bit about oxytocin and what happens when human touch, and some babies that improve when their mother touches them if they're premature.
Yeah.
So I have all these ideas running around. They're not really consistent. And when I hear you say that, it's like pings those
silliness.
circuits.
No, that's silliness. They've got so many confounding variables there that you can't even see straight. So we need to look at, first of all, let's look at introverts versus extroverts, and let's look at the day of death, and we're going to find out whether or not the extroverts live longer than the introverts, and the answer is going to be no. Okay, even if it were, it could be confounded by a number of variables. So this is nonsense, and you as an introvert don't need extrovert. You don't need people for anything. Your life can be improved and your moods of happiness can be improved because there's certain interactions with human beings that are inherently enjoyable because they're banging on circuits that tell you that it's going to increase your likelihood of gene survival. So, but in terms of needing them for any health issue, that answer is ridiculous. Now, there may be some people that, again, very anxious, and that anxiety can be stressful for them, and that stress might be very, very slightly deleterious to their health, and therefore, guess what? They're going to be motivated to seek out other people and affiliate. But yeah, that's all cool. If you're an introvert, thumbs up.
Fantastic. Right. There we go. Yeah, I didn't realize they lived the same, about the same age. So that makes
I haven't
sense to me.
checked it out, but I'm sure that's true. I mean, that's just there's no way there's any substantive effect there. Mm-hmm. Now, you could find one just because it could be that people that are hermitish are bad specimens, funny looking, rejected by other people, live on their own, and have a lot of mutations and a lot of problems. So even then that could be problematic to do that research. We have to control for all those variables. And this person, happily married, competent, et cetera, there's no way that adding human beings into their existence and increasing their social interaction is going to help them physically, and it's not going to hurt them to decrease it. So, yeah, just follow your gut, and you'll be fine.
Fantastic. All right, well, we got 2 callers on the line, so let's take one caller.
Oh, my goodness.
All right,
sure.
Let's see what happens. All right, so caller, this is the 859 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Pam, and I'm calling from Florence, Kentucky.
Uh-huh.
Welcome to the show, Pam.
Very good, Pam.
Thank you.
What's up?
Sorry.
No worries at all. It's just us. This isn't Dr. Oz in front of 8 million people.
Well, no, it's 11:40 at night here, so I am disobeying the Goldhammer dictate to go to bed early and get good sleep.
There you go.
So we spoke just a little over a year ago, and you really helped me to understand where a lot of my social anxiety comes from, and it really helped me. So I'm 51, and nearly 2 years ago I went to True North, and I fasted for 2 weeks, and I was trying to relieve a musculoskeletal problem. I had already, the diet stuff was no problem. I'd done that on my own. And when I was there, it was relaxing and amazing, and I, never left my room except to go to the bathroom and get water. It was awesome. But when I came home, everything came back, and I ended up developing symptoms of fibromyalgia, and my thyroid started not working as well, and so I took Lyrica, I gained back all the weight, and now I've been off for a long time, but I've kept the weight, and I've developed digestive issues. So But I'm not worried about going back to bad old habits because my bowels won't take anything except for wine, of course, is a bad habit that comes back and goes away every once in a while. But what I'm looking for is, what I want to do is how to find satisfaction or happiness in a world where, I worked really hard and I didn't get what I was going for. And I didn't get, not only did I not get what I was going for, I got worse. And I'm saying no thank you to the women's breakfast and to going disc golfing and doing all those things. So, did that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Keep moving, because I need to understand what your dilemma is in terms of your decision making.
Great. Okay. When we talked last time, you said that I was probably face blind to some extent. So now when I let myself, I don't worry about it so much, and everybody knows they're supposed to look for me, that I can't find my children in a crowded room.
Right.
And they all just take care of it for me. So what I'm looking for is how to find happiness with where I am, because where I am is really good. I have a great family. My kids are, one's in grad school, one's been living on his own for 3 years. My husband's got a good job. But this diet thing keeps, and this not being able to move thing keeps smacking me in the face, because I'm not going to go to the women's luncheon or the women's breakfast because it's all food I don't eat. And I can't go out with the family disc golfing or decorate for the dinner dance or whatever 51-year-old women do.
Right. Yes. Okay. So, in other words, we don't have any screaming problem with any of your relationships that are the most
Absolutely
important to you. Right. What we have is we've got problems with sort of a more peripheral process of interaction with other people in various things. So it sounds like the things that you would like to do would be interacting with other women on some normal social level, doing some little sporting things that you'd like to do but you can't do, things of that nature. So it sounds like your life has your options have shrunk to some degree. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
So, there's always things that we can do. And so we have to look at this. Let me back up and take a little wider view of this, because this is a very good question, and it has potential implications for many people across many people struggle with questions like this. Here's the way to think about the way your mind is built and what it is that we're up to in this life. What you have inside the way your mind is constructed is you have you have a phenomenal amount of potential responses. And they're different. So, for example, you have a response or an experience of what it would be like to taste an apple versus a grape versus asparagus versus an ice cream cone. Those are all very different. They're similar in many ways, but they're different. They're distinct. And your nervous system can actually make those distinctions. In the same way, you could watch basketball, you could listen to an opera, you could get your toes massaged. There's all kinds of things. There's really, for all intents and purposes, there's an infinite amount of things that could be done. Now, it's going to turn out that those things fall into categories. So watching one basketball game is very similar to the next basketball game. It's a very similar process. So what you could do is we could build a taxonomy of activities that human beings do. If we did this, this is what I call a taxonomy of happiness. So it's going to turn out, when I've done this, there's a surprisingly limited amount of things that people do. I think there's maybe about 40. So there's, watching other people perform various arts. There's doing those yourself. There's playing games. There's playing sports. There's gardening. There's cooking. There's, flirting and making love. And there's having conversations with friends, et cetera, et cetera. There's looking at aesthetic things in the world. So it's going to turn out that there's a if anybody did this for themselves, there's also doing productive work and getting feedback from other people. There's et cetera. So it turns out there's a fairly limited taxonomy of what I call the taxonomy of happiness. Now, it's going to turn out that this is the answer to your question is going to be very similar to if I was to answer the question, had a different question from somebody similar. Let's suppose somebody called me and said, I'm not real sharp and I don't have much money and I can't do much about my career because, I'm 55 years old and I can only earn X amount of money. So there's things that I wanted to do in this life, but I'm not really going to be able to do them. So even though I'm not too sharp, I am kind of open to experience, and I really wish that I could see Paris, and I would want to see Rome and London and Munich and Japan, and I want to do all these things, but I can't do them. Okay? Now, we might say, well, gee, that's tragic. You're not going to be able to do all these things because those things are out there to be done. The other thing we could say, though, is say, well, it's not a problem because there's more to be done on the taxonomy of happiness to activate happiness circuits than you're going to ever have time to do. Okay? So we have to look at the taxonomy of happiness and see what kinds of things are appealing. So there are things about playing disc golf that's appealing, but we could look inside of disc golf and find out what things about disc golf are appealing. And there's going to be pieces of that we're going to be able to essentially take out of that and replace with something else that you can do. The same thing would be true about the women's breakfast. There's nothing about the women's breakfast where those women are having breakfast that we have to have breakfast. We could actually maneuver around that potentially right there. We can become the freak that brings their own food. And we could joke about it, talk all about it, no problem. We could actually socially engineer that and get away with it. Now, if we don't want to do that, what we can do is we can organize our own little breakfasts, okay? We can also, if it's not women's breakfast, it's women's other thing where people do things, and things that we can do where we're not going to have food being a main focus of something, and we can interact with people in a group context that way. So what we would do is
not in Kentucky.
Yeah, we could. Okay. So what I'm getting at, I hear you, but what I'm getting at is this following notion. This is what I'm going to call with something like this. I'm going to call this package deal dissonance. And so there's many things in this life that the world sells us that it has to be a package deal. That you have to take the package deal. So your spouse is going to be your best friend, your business partner, co-parent the kids, and everything else under the sun. It's like, well, maybe that'll work and maybe it won't. Good luck. Okay. Now, then it's going to be that our kid, we're going to be proud of them. They're going to be athletic. They're going to be this. They're going to be that. They're going to be our best friend, et cetera, et cetera. Good luck. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't work. Okay. Now, your job is supposed to make you good money, give you good esteem from the community, feeling good like you're doing good things, explore the upper limits of your potential, blah, blah. Good luck. Okay? Probably not. Probably not going to happen. Probably the thing that might be the best thing would be to do a job that seemed reasonably rewarding, that was actually rewarding financially, enabling you to have time to do other things that are artistic and still have a standard of living that's adequate. In other words, you piece it together. You don't try to go for the entire package deal. So what we want to do is you want to use your acuity to look inside the things that you like. So you can say, wow, I'd really like to hang out at the women's breakfast. It's like, well, why is that? The reason why is that is going to be probably a couple of things. Probably, people enjoy the noise that comes with a lot of people in a closed space that makes us feel like the whole village is there, and people are eating, and therefore they're happy. That's one of the times when people are happiest. And it's the women's thing, so if there aren't men there, then it reduces the feeling of sexual competition, that without the men there, it doesn't force women to be competing with each other. They can be a coalition. That feels good. In other words, there's all kinds of aspects to that women's lunch that that actually activate a lot of moods of happiness inside of women. That being the case, we can probably extract some of those conditions, and we don't have to have it at that women's lunch. We can have it in some other place. Okay, we have to figure out what that would be. We might even have to create it, and then we have to decide whether or not it's worth the trouble to try to pull that off. I have a way of looking at these problems, like with respect to disc golf. We look inside of disc golf, and anything with anybody that's listening. If there's something that you really like to do but you can't do it, the idea is look inside of it and let's find out the elements of what it is that you like that, and let's see if we can extract elements out of there that we can do. In other words, we piece it together. Anyway, so this is the notion that we can be, and I also like to circulate around another problem-solving concept over the top of everything, and it's the Nazi Germany concept, and that is, if you were Nazi Germany and they told you, well, if you fix the problem of how it is that you can have a get-together with women where you don't have to be eating junk food and you can interact and enjoy their company and they can enjoy your company, if you can get that organized in the next 30 days, then we're going to let you escape and walk over to Switzerland. But if you can't do it, then you're going to stay right here. Now, when we look at that, it's a joke. It's like, well, of course we could organize it. And so a lot of challenges are about how much time and energy and creativity are we willing to risk and spend in order to try to get inside of a problem and try to get our psychological needs met. That's what we're looking to do. And very often the answer is, gee, I don't think it's worth the trouble, and it may not be. There may be lower-hanging fruit somewhere else where the moods of happiness can be activated. And back to my guy who doesn't have the money to visit Rome, Paris, Munich, and London. But what he can do is he can watch movies, he can play in the park, he can bet on fantasy football, he can actually read great classics. Well, he can't because he's not that smart, but he can certainly watch movies about those things. And there's all kinds of, he can visit museums in his own city, and he can do all kinds of things that are very interesting that activates the moods of happiness. And he can actually activate, one of the things that's got him going is his openness to experience and a sense of adventure. He can do that partially, possibly whitewater rafting and other things, backpacking, hiking, and visiting cities that he can afford to visit. This is the notion of that you don't, this is a position of power of understanding that your moods of happiness are latent circuits inside the nervous system that don't require any specific input to get it. They require a type of input to get it. You don't need a specific human being's love or affection. You need love and affection per se. Okay? You don't need any specific job. You need the processes of productive work per se. And this is how it is that this thing works. And so therefore we have an infinite amount of creativity that we could apply to making your life as good as we could possibly make it. All right?
So can I restate?
Sure.
I was looking kind of towards the past, towards that beautiful feeling of running and, the wind in your hair and being outside in the sun. And what I need to go is say, oh, I can be outside in the sun and feel the wind in my hair in my backyard.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for calling,
Pam.
Pam.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the call, Pam. Really appreciate it. All right. We're going to take another caller. And Dr. Lyle, we have actually a third caller as well. So we'll take one right now.
Sure.
Let's see here. I'm going to read the last two numbers of the phone number. So this phone number ending with 331. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. I'm calling from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And what's
your name? Scott. is my name.
Scott, very good. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay. I'm calling in because I'm having an issue that maybe you could help me out with.
Okay.
I have a son, and my ex and I are not together. And my problem was twofold, really. I have a problem with my son lying, and he'll lie about stupid stuff. He'll lie about, I'll ask him, has he brushed his teeth, and he'll say yes, and then I'll smell his breath, and it's obvious that he hasn't. Or, you know, I'll tell him to go clean up his room, and then he'll go do something, and I'll say, have you cleaned up your room? And he'll tell me, yes, I cleaned up my room. And, you know, he hasn't cleaned up his room, you know, and then I'll confront him about it, and I'll have 1,000,001 reasons, excuses why his room's not clean, you know, and he'll just lie to your face. And this is an issue because I'm not with my ex, so sometimes he'll lie to her about what's going on or whatever. And my other issue is with school. He, you know, he just doesn't want to do the work. And, you know, I've been listening to your podcast, so I understand your perspective on that is, hey, if like there's the, you know, he's not at this point or whatever. He's not very detail oriented. He's not very driven. There's not too much you can do about that. He has to make his mind up for himself as far as that goes. But I mean, I was wondering, is there any way you could kind of tweak that? I come from a background in finance and applied economics. You know, that's my educational background. And so when I see something, I look at it as a problem of incentives. Like maybe I'm not incentivizing him properly to do his work. And if I give the incentive structure right or raise the incentive so he thinks it's worth his time, he would do this thing. So I just wanted to see what you had to say about that.
That's all very reasonable, Scott. And so thinking about this in terms of cost-benefit analysis is going to make some sense, but we're going to look inside of that, and we're going to see how far we want to take it. Okay. So the first thing how old is he?
He's 10.
Yeah. Okay. So what's going to happen is kids do a lot of lying. They probably don't do too much more than adults. The issue is that just to take the camera back a little bit for everybody so that you understand lying in principle. The what there is in communication. The only reason why communication systems evolve between animals is because the benefits of communicating are greater than the costs. And so over evolutionary time, it was in the best interest of the same species to actually signal to each other. There's a few times when there's signals between species, but that's rare. Typically, if we're thinking about sophisticated communication systems out of which human language would have evolved, we're talking about within systems, communication systems. And so what we're going to see is that in general, the benefits are greater than the cost. And if we look at communication, we're going to see that communication has the following structure, and that is that there's a sender, there's a message, and there's a receiver. And the purpose of all communication is for the sender to be intending to influence the receiver. And the reason why the sender is attempting to influence the receiver is because they want to influence the receiver to the sender's benefit. So in the most simple structure, a father says to his son, "Hey kid, get out of the street." So that is he's attempting to influence the son's behavior. We could say manipulate, which would be have a slightly pejorative tone, but that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And so we're trying to influence the son's behavior, and that is in the father's best interest to do that. In this case, we're going to call that a win-win communication. Most communications are win-win. At least the total vector analysis of the cost-benefit of communications in general across the natural history of a species has been that the expense of communication has been greater than the cost. Now let's look at a second example so that we see that there's a vulnerability here, and that is that the sender could be a swindler and the receiver could be a little old lady. and the swindler's communication is, little old lady, buy my swampland. Okay, so if he is successful, it's a win for the swindler, and it is a lose for the little old lady. So in this case, it's a win-lose, but in order for there to be the possibility of the little old lady getting swindled, there had to be the possibility that she would also be a net recipient of communications across her lifetime on average. So in other words, most of the time, the benefit outweighs the cost. Now, however, we cannot stop the ugly underbelly that in order to evolve susceptibility to win-win messages. So you want to be susceptible to win-win messages. You want to be the son that when the dad says, hey, get out of the street, you are manipulated by this. You don't want to be inert with respect to that intended communication action because it could have been a win-win. So this being the case, people are built to be susceptible to communications, and that means that there's going to be deception. And that means deception is going to evolve to be very, very common in all likelihood, and it's going to be a major expense that's sitting under the profits of communication, a la false advertising, okay? Exaggerated advertising. So that's going to be absolutely all over the place in communication, and you're going to see it all over human nature. Now, what your son needs to do in this life is he needs to lie, and he needs to lie like hell all the time. He needs to try to figure out what the limits of it are, okay? He needs to figure out how it works. He needs to find out how smart other people are and whether they can figure it out. In other words, he's got to figure out the parameters of the cost-benefit of lying. And so that's what he's going through, and you can count on it continuing for quite a while. You're going to find out that he will continue to discover that other people are smarter and figure it out, and that it hurts his reputation, and therefore sometimes when he tells the truth, people don't believe him, i.e. the little boy that cried wolf. You start to figure out over time that your reputation actually is going to mean something, and you're not going to want to sacrifice it too easily. So this is a normal developmental process. So number one, don't worry about that. Forget it. Now, if he winds up imposing any significant costs on you behind one of these lies, then you let him have it, okay? You're like, listen, you little bastard, you did this, and you put me in a really bad spot, okay? So you do that, you pull a stunt like that again, there's going to be some prices. That's how we handle that. Okay. Now, the second thing is about schoolwork. So he's 10 years old, so I assume he's what, 5th grade now?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So what is his, how is he doing just in general? Is he passing? Is he above average? What's his deal?
It's crazy because he can, I mean, occasionally he'll get, all A's and B's, but most of the time in the core, like math and science and stuff, sometimes even reading, but more math and science, he won't do the work. And, he's been diagnosed with ADHD. I don't know what your thoughts on that is, but his teachers will tell him, Aiden, well, I shouldn't be saying that.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Billy.
I can edit it out later.
You need to do these math problems, and he'll be there in class, and he'll say, I don't want to do the math problems, and he's not only is he I don't want to say lazy, but lazy, but he's a lot braver than I was when I was a kid, right? When I was a kid, I was in the South. I'm in the South now, and they had a paddle hanging out on the principal's door, and he knew if you crossed the line, he could use that paddle on you, right? He's brave enough where he's figured out there's nothing that they can do to him. My dad might take away my electronics or whatever, punish me, but he knows there's no he's not going to be getting paddled, and his mom doesn't really impose too strict a discipline. She's more, and maybe this is the case with, I don't want to be sexist here, but I feel like this is more the case with women in general. They're more like, oh, it's okay, honey, So, and we're not together, and she's
Yeah.
very what's the word for it? She doesn't want to work with anyone. She's very hard-headed,
So now let me ask this again. What do you know, for example, about his achievement testing, like where he stands with respect to math and verbal scores relative to other kids his age? Do you actually know where he stands?
Yeah, he's reading on the 5th grade level math. He's probably, he's just not, he can learn it. I'll teach it to him. I don't know what his direct score is, right? But it's probably below because he just won't be bothered to learn it, Okay. If you teach it to him and make him sit down and learn it, he can do the math problems, but he doesn't want to put in the effort to learn it. Okay,
so let's try to back up for a minute and let's find out sort of what some of your frustration is coming from. The appropriate bar for this kid is to pass, okay? That's all we really want. We don't want the hassle of having to do a grade over. So that's actually where the bar should be. There is no rush on this kid with respect to achieving any kind of academic capabilities because he's going to wander. We don't know how much horsepower he is, but it sounds like he's somewhere in the middle of the bell curve. Okay, we don't know exactly where he is, but he's not having something jump out at us as either very low or very high. And so as a result, what it means is that, if we were a super high conscientious parent or set of parents, we'd be fretting and biting our nails and trying to twist him into a pretzel to try to have him do well relative to his age cohort at every little milestone along the way. That would be a mistake and a total waste of time. The truth is that we're just trying to meander this kid through high school, and we don't care how well he's prepared for anything when he gets done with high school. We just want him to pass, because if he's going to do anything significant past high school, it doesn't have to be when he's 18, and it probably won't be. Okay? So this kid will need to go out there and rub shoulders with the proletariat for a while and get his hands burned by grease on a grill and all kinds of other things. Okay?
Yeah.
And so he needs to do that. He needs to do that for probably a few years and find out that, now, wait a second, what Dad says about going to college may not be such a bad idea. How do you become a sonogram tech again? Okay? And so then we're going to start talking about, now we're going to be heading back to the JC at 22 or 23 years old, now with a plan and a purpose. Okay? So now at that point, this is an older brain, a smarter brain, and now it's a brain that's finally motivated. And it's going to turn out that now you have to learn that algebra crap that you didn't want to learn in high school. Well, no problem. He had no motivation to learn it in high school when he was 14 or 15. But now he's 22, 23, and he sees money in the future, and it turns out that he's under a little monetary deprivation because he wants to have a nice car to go out with the better-looking girls. Oops, we got a motivational situation, okay? So this is what I'm trying to tell you in general is that it's your high conscientiousness that is actually seeing this as would be sensible as essentially a gene race. And your kid, is on the same gene line that all these other kids his age are, and he's racing against other kids his age. And if he doesn't keep up, and we don't get an edge, and he doesn't push himself and learn, then he's going to fall behind in the gene race, and then he's not going to be as fancy. Well, trust me, this is all absurd, because the girls aren't saying, well, when did you graduate? Oh, you didn't graduate the JC till you were 24, and then you didn't get your little certificate in air conditioning till you were 25 and a half? Oh, well, in that case, I'm not interested. They couldn't care less. Okay? So so what we need to do is flush that idea, take pressure off yourself, and the only thing I want this kid to do is not be a pain in the ass to you by flunking out. Okay? As long as he's not, if he starts flunking out, if he's literally in danger of flunking, then I would use some of your incentive issues, take away all his toys, make his life, deprive misery, until he gets off his ass and makes sure that he passes. But as long as he's passing, there's really no incentive for this kid in the game. He's not particularly talented or interested, and he just doesn't care. It's not his thing. So let him go do his thing, and the hell with the schools and their expectations about how interested he should be in their stuff.
Okay. So then let me ask you this. If he, because, like I said, sometimes he'll get A's, sometimes he'll get C's, and he's gotten D's and F's before. If he is flunking, and I take it, like I've taken away his electronics, and he's still not doing well, what can I do other than like physical discipline, which I can't do because it's in my parenting agreement?
I would never physically discipline a kid. I would just, if I knew that the kid was capable of, it makes a difference about whether I know they're capable. Now, there's other things that it's extremely important that we don't have a kid in the ego trap where the expectations are actually too high. So what we want to do is we want to tell them, listen, everything you want to do and goof off, etc., you get as long as you get a D. Okay? I don't really care if you get. I don't really care if you get. I don't care if you get an A or a B, and I don't think you can. You say, God forbid, if you manage to pull a B, I'm going to give you this or that treat. Okay, but I don't think there's a chance in hell you could do that. Okay, I think that where you're at is I think you could probably your best work is probably a C. Okay, and if you get a D, that's okay with me. But if you get an F, that's really shitty, and things are going to get tough around here. Okay. So that way we keep him out of the ego trap. And we
challenge him. So he's
slightly insult him. Okay, but we do it.
We nag him. We nag him a little.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're like, look, I know that, there's probably not much chance you could do as good as a B. But if you managed to, you get this prize. But I don't think you can get it. Okay. So this is how we do it. We pound a bamboo shoot under his fingernails, and but we need to, but the bar is ultimately very low, and so therefore the kid hopefully is not ego trapped, and he's got enough desire to not be humiliated by failing. He does not need to have any high expectations for achievement at all, because that's going to drive him to do nothing. So that's how we do that, and et cetera. I think I have on my website I have about a 5 or 7 minute thing about my kid is flunking out, and so I suggest it's esteemdynamics.com. You can go there and listen to that little snippet. It's 5, 7, 8 minutes, and it will sort of reiterate some of the principles that I'm talking about tonight. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Very good, Scott. Thank you for calling. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Thank you very much for the call, Scott. Really appreciate it. It's esteemdynamics.org. Okay, so we got a third caller.
It's .com.
Oh, it's .com now.
Nowadays.
Fantastic.
Yeah, aren't we fancy? Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Who do we got now?
We got a third caller. So caller, where are you calling from? What's your name?
Hey, Nate and Dr. Lyle, it's Rob.
Hey, Rob.
Dr. Lyle. Hey, guys. Nate, I have two questions. The first one should be really easy for Dr. Lyle. The second one's really good, I think. Dr. Lyle, what's your response to someone who says, for example, when I say something that you say, a line that you like to say, humans are designed by nature to fill in the blank, and someone responds and says, that's an appeal to nature fallacy. What's a good response to someone who always wants to say, whenever you bring up the word nature or natural, they'll say that's an appeal to nature fallacy?
Yeah. Well, I would say this: the naturalistic fallacy, the notion that there's several problems and several ways to think about issues. Number one, the notion. So one problem is that to describe the what it is that essentially how we're designed, we are never trying to say that it is the way that it should be or that it's the best way. So sometimes people are slightly offended in thinking that that this is what it is that this is what we're implying. Okay, so this is this is the notion that this is a value-laden concept, and this is it's sort of the way things are versus the way they ought to be, and so what we're trying to say is what I'm trying to say is the following: that the way nature designed things is interesting, and it's important for us to understand. And it can be extremely useful for us to understand this. But it doesn't mean that it is desirable. In fact, very often it is not. So I can let me give an example of when people get into trouble, and by being people can be very blinded and upset and essentially very argumentative unnecessarily, because they don't really understand what it is that we're up to. Let me give you an example. If we were going to talk about rape, so very many folks of various political persuasions are very offended by an evolutionary psychology explanation of rape. And rape is of course, inherently a very important thing to understand. And there are a great many, left-wing feminists who are just going to say it's an act of violence, it's not an act of sex. That's a terrible mistake, and it's an insane way of trying to analyze the problem. Of course, it's an act of violence from the viewpoint of the victim. But if you're trying to understand the behavior, it's a sex act of a male that's attempting to steal the reproductive machinery of the female. That's what it is. Okay? Is it violent? Well, of course it's violent. Okay? But it is, and women will say it has nothing to do with sex. Of course it does. What do you think it is? Okay? Now, so people can be disturbed by this, and they can be very, very disturbed because they can believe that when you talk the way we talk here, and you essentially explain things down at the level of the engineering of the genetic code as it is built nervous systems to have certain responses and behaviors, it can seem very cold. It can seem ruthless. And it can seem, it can also be effectively, it can look like an absolving or excuses. It is not. Okay, so there's a huge difference between explaining something and essentially saying that it's fine or it's okay because there was a biological basis for it. So rape is a criminal act. It's the act that in the Stone Age that those criminal acts were defended. This is what defended against, and they were punished, and they were often punished by death. And so the Stone Age had their own way of dealing with problems like this. So, but if you're ever going to understand it, we have to understand the evolutionary motives that are guiding it, and then that can help us potentially engineer human interaction and human society and cost-benefit analysis to penalties, et cetera, in order to reduce the problems associated with what is fundamentally a conflict of interest. Let me say a little bit more. I know we're going far afield, and I'm going to try to get back to you with your other question. But there is, if you actually want to grasp nature and humans and their place in it, and a great many of the problems that people face and deal with, and essentially the problems of life, you must understand that life is inherently what the philosophers are going to call tragic. Now, tragic doesn't mean it's a tragedy. It means that there are inherent conflicts that are problematic. And there is an alternative view for humanity and its capability in the future that we're going to call a utopian or idealistic view. And that idealistic view sounds wonderful, and it comes out of the mouths of politicians, and it comes out of the mouths of some philosophers, and it all seems dandy, and it seems like what it could be, should be, ought to be, and can be. But the utopian view is mistaken. The truth is that life is inherently tragic. And, for example, show me where on the African savannah we don't have predators and prey. It simply is the truth that lion has to kill something in order to survive. That is just the way it is. It's going to turn out that two young men are both very interested in one female, and only one of them is going to get her, and that's the way it is. It's going to turn out that a huge percentage of human beings will never mate with anybody that they want to mate with. And the people that they do mate with, they didn't really want to be with, but it's all they could get. That is inherently tragic. Okay? A great many people are going to do very hard work, and they're not going to get much satisfaction from it, and they're not going to get a lot of esteem for what it is that they do. That is inherently tragic. Because they may not be very smart, may not be very talented, etc. So there are tragic and difficult problems in life. That doesn't mean it's a horrible show. It means it's difficult and problematic. And so people that criticize evolutionary psychology's peering into human nature and more broadly the evolution of all minds. So evolutionary psychology doesn't begin and end at humans. It's all over the map, all the way to the smallest brain on Earth. The fact that we can explain and understand a great many things is that we are not in any way saying that it should be this way. We're saying that it has been this way, and it can significantly still be this way. And that is not a naturalistic fallacy because we're not prescribing, we are explaining. Okay?
Wow. That's
all
brilliant.
Right.
Do we have time for one more?
Let's get your question, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
All right. Dr. Lyle, what is the evolutionary psychology behind Beatlemania? And let me explain real quick, because when I say Beatlemania, I don't just mean the Beatles. I mean, you look at footage, and there's absolutely, I could picture people looking at footage and say, "Oh, isn't that cute? The girls are they're happy and having fun." But it's like, no. Take a closer look. They look like they just saw like their mother die or something. They look like many of them are fainting. And to those who would think, oh, well, that's just British and American male performers. No. There's 195 countries in the world. This happens all over the world with biological heterosexual females who respond to certain males. There's a picture of Kim Jong-un with he's sitting there smiling, and he has 5 females clinging to him, crying. This is, and then on the other end you have a performer like Taylor Swift, who's female, and yes, her audience is mostly female, but they're not screaming they scream, but they're not reacting in the same way they did to Elvis and the Beatles and Justin Bieber and Kim Jong-il and the rest. So, and the only time I've seen a male do this is if he happens to be a gay male. I don't, straight heterosexual males don't react this way to, if you brought me in the room to a really attractive supermodel, I'm not gonna cry and faint.
Yes.
So what's the evolutionary psychology behind that?
Great question. What you're seeing is a projection or a supernormal process of what is in fact what we're going to call the He-Man strategy. So females are designed by nature to play mating strategies along a continuum that would be from He-Man strategy all the way to cuckoldry. And in the middle is going to be what we're going to call pair bond. So if we're going to just quickly think about that females are designed by nature to guard the eggs and try to actually, human females, given that we are a pair bond-ish species, they are a two-factor mating decision maker. They're trying to get the optimal genes that they can get, while at the same time getting the optimal amount of resources. So the females essentially thread the needle between two mating priorities: get the best genes and the best resources. And you can see that inside the female head, she's in dissonance over those two things. Think of a little squatty guy with terrible looks, but he's got $1 billion, okay? And you can just see a little bit of dissonance in some females over this, but not a lot, okay? Because it doesn't really matter how many resources he has, the genes. She doesn't want her children to look anything like that. That doesn't seem to be the optimal evolutionary problem. Solution. Look on the other side. Handsome as hell, no resources. Now what's the solution? Well, the solution there is perfectly reasonable. In other words, it's perfectly reasonable that we would that the female might mate with a guy who's really handsome, even though she's not going to get any resources. So that you can see. But what would be even better than using your own brain to figure out whether or not some male has got really fancy genes is to also look at other females and to check computers. Make sure the other computers are coming up with the same answer. Because if they are coming up with the same answer, we can be a hell of a lot more confident of our decision. Okay? So think about two females in a bar. They're both a pair of 8s. And a 9.5 male walks in. Now, because there's some variance, or actually we'll kind of call it a 9, and because there's 10% variance or so on what people might think, one girl is immediately thinking, boy, I would sleep with that guy, he's a 10. But what she's going to do is she's going to turn to her friend and say, hey, look at that. And she's going to be the reason she's doing that, or one of the reasons, is she's getting a computer check on her own brain, because her brain is only one sample of whether or not those genes are really that good, and she should really make that decision. So what she's going to do is her friend goes, oh, my God, what a dreamboat. Then the first girl's brain says, aha, he's a 10 just like I thought he was. So if I mate with him, he's a 10, I am an 8, the offspring is likely to be a 9, and in fact, if we're lucky, it's a 9.5, and if it's a son, he's going to rule the world just like this guy's going to rule my world in about half an hour. Okay? So this is the He-Man strategy, and this is, of course, common throughout the animal kingdom. So whatever you saw in the beetles, you see it all over the place. There are birds where one bird will mate with 100 females in a morning, and there's 100 other male birds mate with 0. That's the beetles. Okay? And it's going to turn out that other experiments have shown that the females don't use what we call independent method. They don't all independently decide that one bird is the fanciest bird. They have a lot of cues that they are highly reactive to that, and they're very excited about it. But it turns out what's also exciting is to find out that all the other females agree, i.e., we reduce her risk by checking. So this is what's happening in beetle media. You're seeing women actually falling at their knees, almost sobbing that they're not going to be able to get to that DNA because they can see they have phenomenal competition, but they would dearly love to get there, and they are signaling to those males, you can have me with no investment, just come take my eggs. Okay? And I think that's sort of what it is that you're seeing.